I'm very excited to introduce tonight's presenter, Igal Harmelin. He is a spiritual director, meditation teacher, and trauma healer. He offers sessions for spiritual direction and healing developmental trauma and conducts meditative attunement workshops for therapists. He has taught meditation to thousands of people on 4 continents and has spent years in extended meditation retreats. He has translated into Hebrew a number of books on religion and spirituality for Israel's largest publisher. You can find him at igalharmelin.com. Also, Igal is a member of the JCC's meditation facility, and he has been with us for many years. So welcome, Igal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Chag Sameach, happy Shavuot. And it is my joy to speak about, as the topic said, Ayeh Mekom Kevodo. I'm sorry that it was not translated. It's my fault. I should have included a translation. I did not. The words Ayeh Mekom Kevodo, which in Hebrew mean where is the place of his glory, are actually taken from the prayer of Musaf. There are 3 prayers. There are 2 prayers in Shabbat morning. One is the prayer before the reading of the Torah, and after the reading of the Torah is the prayer of Musaf, the additional prayer. And in that prayer, the most sacred...
So put the sound on.
Paul Vezel, are you... Yeah, can you keep yourself muted, please? Thank you. So where was I? Yes. The holiest of section of the prayer is the Kedusha, the proclamation of the holiness of God and by angels. And in that Kedusha, there is the sentence that the angels are supposedly proclaiming, saying, Ayeh Mekom Kevodo. Where is the place of his glory? And this question, which is put in the mouth of the angels, is actually a question that each spiritual aspirant, each religious seeker, each person that aspires for something higher actually can ask. I want to connect to something that's bigger than me. I want to find a way of not experiencing myself as a skin-encapsulated ego. I want to get out of that boundary. I want to connect to something bigger, maybe the intelligence that runs the whole unfathomably large universe. I want to find deep meaning and purpose. And in a religious language, it would be to ask, where is the place of his glory? In other words, where is God? And of course, God is one way of talking about this, and it's the Jewish way of talking about this, but we're talking about something that's big, that's profound, that's unknown, that we somehow have a yearning to connect with. And from a mystical point of view, from a Jewish mystical point of view, that means the point of view of the Hasids, the point of view of the Kabbalists, the answer would come from the Zohar. The Zohar is the quintessential book of the Hebrew Kabbalah, of the Jewish Kabbalah, which scholars attributed to Moshe de Leon from the 12th century. The religious people attributed to Shimon Bar Yochai from the 1st century. That will not be settled here. But the Zohar has a very famous sentence in which it says, Leit atar panui minei. It's Aramaic for there is no place where he, capital H, is not. And of course, calling God he doesn't really make sense. You can call it she, you can call it it. None of them make sense. But there is no place where that holiness, that glory of God is not, is what it tells you. And in fact, in the very prayer of the Musaf, the answer to that question is given. It says in Hebrew, I'll say it in Hebrew, Kevodo male olam. His glory fills the earth. And they also said in that prayer, it quotes Isaiah, when Isaiah has this experience in the temple where the chariot is revealed to him, where God's glory, throne of glory is revealed to him. He hears the angels saying, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melo Chol Haaretz Kvodo. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. His glory fills the earth. So what does that mean? Holy in Hebrew, Kadosh, means other, transcendental, different, separate. So the angels first of all say, God is holy, 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 which means he's completely transcendental, completely beyond anything. But they also say his glory fills the earth. So he's both transcendental and he's immanent. So that is the mystical understanding of the presence of the answer to the question, Ayeh Mekom Kevodo, where is the place of his glory? And I will talk a little bit later, what do I mean by when I say the mystical understanding? So how do we square the fact that there is this unbounded diversity, hundreds of millions of stars in hundreds of millions of galaxies, and even on our planet, such immense, incomprehensible diversity of species, of plants, and of different matter, different types of materials? How do we square all this incredible diversity with the fact that everything, according to that mystical understanding, is God? So again, from the mystical understanding, and not just the Jewish, also Muslim and Christian and Hindu and Buddhist mystical understanding, the ultimate reality is one. One, not in the sense of as opposed to 2, 3, or 4, but one as the only one. You know, in Aramaic, there's a statement in the Zohar that appears also in the prayer, in the Orthodox prayer, Ant hu chad velo bechushban. You are one, but not one in the sense of accounting, not of counting. You are one in the sense of you are the only one. And if those of you who sometimes go to shul, you remember when the Torah is brought out, then the exclamation is Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch Lo'olam Va'ed. God was king, God is king, God will be king. In other words, there is no time. There's only the present moment. And there is the oneness of God, that from the absolute mystical perspective, that's the only reality. And all the different how do you say, all the different forms and phenomena, they are actually considered to be just quantifications, quantified expressions of the one. So this is something that needs to be talked about. What does it mean, quantified expressions of the one? There is in the mystical tradition the saying of garments. In other words, there is the one, and the myriads of forms and phenomena are considered to be quantifications of the one, garments of the one, levushim in Hebrew. So all the different forms that we see and that we are just garments through which the one manifests. And what do the garments do? What is the function of the garment? Each one of those garments has the function of asking in his or hers or its particular way the question, Ayeh Mekom Kevodo, where is the place of his glory? That question, where is the place of his glory, can be summarized as the thing that each aspect of manifestation inquires. So when a blade of grass grows, that's the blade of grass, that's the life force. The blade of grass way of singing and asking the question, Ayeh Mekom Kevodo, where is the place of its glory? By its very growth. When an animal fulfills its life, its life injunction to live, to procreate, to eat, to hunt, to seek shelter, it's the animal's way of responding to the life force, which is that part of this animal's part of the symphony of Ayeh Mekom Kevodo. When a human being aspires, when a human being strives, when a human being tries to improve, when a human being tries to become more conscious, that's yet another way of that force of a quantified expression of one garment singing its song of Ayeh Mekom Kevodo. And from that point of view, the entire universe can be seen as one big symphony of every part of the universe singing, aspiring, desiring, trying to connect to that one, which is its own nature for its source and its goal. And I love that the verse from the Psalms, Hashamayim mesaprim kvod elu ma'aseh yadav magid harakia. The heavens tell the glory of God, and the work of his hands is told by the firmament. So even on the cosmic level, every aspect of manifestation is really part of this song, of this proclamation of Ayeh Mekom Kevodo. Now, if it's true, if the whole universe is just one big symphony of asking Ayeh Mekom Kevodo and late atar panui minei, there is no spot where he is not, then he or it or she, however we want to refer to that absolute oneness, is also here right now. And what does that mean? It means that if it's everywhere, it's here. And the Quran has a beautiful, beautiful verse. It says, we, that God speaking of himself in the first person plural, we are closer to him, to man, than his jugular vein. In other words, more intimate than the intimate. And Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. And Rabbi Avraham Abulafia, our own Kabbalist, said something very radical. Says, your heart is your rabbi and God is with you. Those of you who know Krishnamurti, this is the Jewish version of Jiddu Krishnamurti. And my favorite of all these quotes is the one by the Chernobyl Rebbe, the Menachem Nahum of Chernobyl, lived around 200 years ago, one of the founders of Hasidism, one of the students of the Maggid of Mezrich. And he has a very well-known statement, and he says, Chai ani, umihu hachayut sheli, halo haborei yitbarach. I am alive, And who is that aliveness in me? Is it not the blessed Creator? He does not ask, what is that aliveness in me? He says, who is that aliveness in me? The very fact that I am alive, the very fact that my heart beats, the very fact that I can breathe, that is my connection to the Almighty. So at this point, before I continue, I'd like us to do a short exercise, if you don't mind. It won't be long. If you just sit comfortably wherever you are, and if you can, just put your phone on airplane mode at least. And if you can't do it for 3-4 minutes, we need to talk. So just put your phone on airplane mode and close your eyes and take a deep breath. Do not try to remove any thoughts or change anything about your emotions. Don't change anything. Just let things be exactly as they are. And notice your exhalation. I'm not asking you to concentrate or push the thoughts away. Just notice your exhalation. As if every time you exhale, you drop more deeply into your body. Another exhalation and another sinking into the sensation of the body. And notice that every time you do that, you may feel something else, maybe some currents or tingling here and there, or maybe even pains or discomfort. And just let everything be exactly as it is without trying to change it. As if with every exhalation, there's more awareness of the bodily sensations. And now bring your awareness to your feet. Notice your feet touching the ground. Take a deep breath. You could maybe wiggle your toes a little bit and your fingers, and slowly come back. And I wanted to, the reason I did this exercise is just to give you a taste of what it means to do what the Chernobyler says, I am alive, and who is this aliveness in me? What it feels like just to somehow sense the aliveness within oneself. And from the context of what I said, this shows us what a profoundly spiritual and deeply devotional practice that is. I know it's very popular these days to market meditation as, oh, it's just like you focus on your breath. But no, from the religious point of view, this is you focus on the life force. And the life force is something very, very profound. And I hope that this very short meditation gives some of you a taste of that. So in a few minutes that remain, I would like to devote the time to explain what I mean when I kept saying the mystical perspective. What is a mystical perspective? In a sense, I've spoken about nothing else tonight. Mystical perspective, one way of looking at it, is a perspective that sees God in everything and everywhere, and that there is nothing outside the realm of God. And there's a lot that one can talk about it, but a mystic is somebody who's committed to making that a living reality in his or her life and convey that to others. But I want to give a certain sense of what a mystical perspective is. And I want to talk about three possible perspectives that we can have. Let's say we're looking at a sunset. So one perspective would be the scientific perspective. So you wouldn't even say that the sun is setting because we know that the sun is not setting. What you would say is, the earth is rotating from west to east. And so we see that the sun is actually going down, but actually what happens is we are going from the west to the east. And that's what's happening. And then it happens at this angle in the winter, and at this angle in the winter, and then more south in the summer, because of how the sun rotates around, the earth rotates around the sun. It's pretty accurate. And it talks about is something completely outside us, something that happens there. We are here and it happens there. And then there's the poetic, artistic way of talking about the same thing. And it brings it closer to us. So for example, if I go with my beloved on the Hudson and the sun is setting, I don't say, oh, I think we are rotating away from the sun right now. I say, no, look what a beautiful sunset. And if I was a total romantic, then I would bow down and offer a ring and propose. You know, it does something to us when we look at it from a poetic, artistic point of view. We bring that which is outside a little bit closer in the sense that we are actually looking at what is happening to us, how it affects us. But the mystical perspective, and these two perspectives can coexist. It's not that one is better or negating the other. They both can coexist. And then there is a third way of looking at it, which is in our cultural milieu not very popular, and that is that I don't see events outside as outside of me. I see them as a reflection of my interior. And I want to give you an example. You know that we actually see a very small sliver of reality. We see so much of the electromagnetic spectrum. We hear so much of the auditory spectrum. We actually, our senses are very limited. And in addition to that, we filter out all the time quite a lot of information as we focus. You may have seen this experiments when you are asked to focus on a video of basketball players, and you have supposed to count how many times they pass the ball. And then they tell you, did you notice the gorilla that went through the court? And you said, no. And then they play it again. You realize, oh, the gorilla went through the court because you were so busy counting the balls, you didn't see the gorilla. And what psychologists tell us, that sliver which we see, that part and the part that we don't see, we filter from our conscious awareness as a result of our inner psyche, of our state of our inner psyche. This is what Jung, C.G. Jung, said when he talked about synchronicity. Today, synchronicity is if two things happen at the same time, that's synchronicity. No, synchronicity is something that Jung coined, which is much more profound. The universe outside reflects to you your inner reality. So out of all the possibilities that are out there, you will see those that match your psychological condition at the moment. The primary reality is your consciousness. That determines the world out there. That's turns the table upside down. And what it actually means that, for example, Jung used to say, miracles are real to those who believe in miracles. In other words, if you don't believe in miracles, they will not happen to you. Or as other people say, the God that you don't believe in does not exist. So something about the internal situation in which you are in determines what the world outside is. And this has radical consequences. Because if it's true, and again, you have to do a lot of serious introspection and spiritual and psychological work to realize that this is true. Very committed, serious work. But if you have a glimpse that this is true, then that means that if I want to change the reality that's outside of me, the first place to start is inside. As Gandhi used to say, be the change you want to see in the world. In other words, within me is the ability to connect. When I say Ayeh Mekom Kevodo, one way of saying it, Mekom Kevodo is here. The place of his glory is here. That's why, as Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. And Rabbi Abulafia said, Elohim betochacha, God is within you. So if I want to affect a change, the first thing is the inside of me. And then you will say, but what are you talking about? Some changes are collective, like if there's a war, everybody's affected. If there's COVID-19, everybody's affected. Look at this Tikkun Shavuot, we all do it through Zoom. We're all affected by it. So first of all, I'd like to say that we are not all affected in the same way. If you do a statistics, you'll find for some people, it was the worst thing in the world. And for some, it was the most, I hate to say this, but it's true. For some people, it was one of the most powerful and beneficial time of their life. This is one thing. And even in concentration camps, some people just chose one way of respond. I don't know if chose, but some people responded in one way. And some people came out like Viktor Frankl or Etty Hillesum, who came up with a completely different way of responding to the same horrendous reality. So something about our own reality determines how we see it and how we respond to it. And this is what brings me to the events of Mount Sinai. The events of Mount Sinai were such, you know, if you remember the story of Mount Sinai, which today we are celebrating the day supposedly the Torah was given. If you're familiar with the story, the Torah was given to them less than 2 months after they left Egypt. So they were still slaves 2 months before that. And somehow a collective somehow went through a process of transformation where they could see a different reality. I'll be honest with you, the fact that 3,500 years ago, I don't know, 1 million liberated slaves or so received the revelation, glorious as it is, it doesn't affect my life in the 21st century in New York. It just doesn't. It can inspire me. It can, it can inspire me, but it cannot really affect my life right now. What can affect my life is that as an example of possibility of change right now. The fact that you can move, one can move as a collective from, if they are united, from slavery to a revelation of wisdom in a short time. And I don't know if it takes 60 days, but basically there is an invitation here to, first of all, try to social change, which we all profess that we want. First and foremost, by changing ourselves. For me, if you ask me how, it will be through meditation, through trauma healing, which is why I meditate all my life, which is why I work on my healing of trauma, which is why I teach meditation and I offer a trauma healing session, because this is, for me, is holy work. Because the more of us change the internal perspective, the more we can see within ourselves the mystical perspective, the more we can see that our very breath is the way we can connect to that wholeness of that whole universe, the greater is the chance for our society to change. I could speak a lot more, but I want to give you a chance to ask questions. And so may I suggest that you type your questions in the chat to Sherry. And Sherry, if you have any questions, you can read them already.
We do have one question so far.
Yes.
How is what you're talking about different from pantheism?
Pantheism, good. Thank you very much. So I understand pantheism as God being everywhere and everything is God. But if anything, I would say I'm not a pantheist, but if you really want the scientific terms, I will say I'm a panentheist. And a panentheist is somebody who says, yes, God is everywhere, but there's also an aspect of God that's mysterious, untouchable, beyond everything. And when I said, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Kol Haaretz Kvodo, holy, holy, holy is the Adonai Tzvaot, the earth is full of his glory. That's, in my sense, is panentheism, because it has, indeed, the earth is full of his glory. but there's also Kadosh, 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 which is the transcendental, the ungraspable, the mysterious, that which those who talk about him don't know, and those who know don't talk. So that also tells you where you should place me tonight. And yes, I hope that answers the question. And if it doesn't answer the question, then go ahead and submit some more questions about it. And yeah.
Do you have any more questions?
So until there are more questions, and don't feel pressure to say anything, to give any questions, I want to say something about the religious or the spiritual life. We live in a time of great cynicism. The time we live in, we call it the scientific age, is actually a very wonderful time in some respect. If you look at the development, the historical development that led to the emergence of science, then you came to a point where superstition was the name of the game. Everybody had opinions, and they used those opinions to basically enslave other people. And that was the predominance of the church or other organized religious institutions, which basically became a place for power struggles. And then something happened, and people started to inquire themselves, what is truth? And they decided to remove subjectivity. And when they remove subjectivity, to come to an objective way of perceiving reality. That has been wonderful. Except what happened is we were so drunk with the success of scientific knowledge that we threw the baby with the bathwater. And I would like to suggest that in our day and age, we see the limitation of only going by by objective means of gaining knowledge, of just science. We need the spirit. And it seems to me that the call now is how to reintroduce the spirit in a way that does not negate the amazing progress that happened as a result of science. That, I think, where we stand today. I see there's a number of questions here in the chat.
There are. Please say more about how we only see what reflects back who we are on the inside.
Okay. All right. Do you know friends of yours that always run into difficulties? It doesn't matter what they do, left, right, center, they always run into obstacles. They always run into people who really dislike them. And there's always somebody in their universe who's the cause of their misery. You may even know periods in your life when you were like that, God forbid. Or you may know other people who are exactly the opposite. It doesn't matter what they touch, there's always joy. There's always, even in difficult situations, they find a way of actually extracting something positive out of it. And I'm not talking, of course, I mean, listen, if somebody gets a broken hand, they cannot pretend, oh, this is the most wonderful thing that happened to me. That would be kind of a psychosis. But some people overall, their experience in life is different than others. And also, you will experience, I certainly have experienced, that as a result of serious spiritual and psychological work, your experience of life changes. You know, a lot of people, there's one of the things that I work with often is people who sabotage themselves. People who, let's say, they work 6 years towards the dissertation, and the last time they have to just submit the paper and they back off. And this is a lot more common than you think. People who just strive to get a good job, and when they're about to get it, they check out. Something has to happen for the person to allow that activation of self to be permissible. These are just two very simple examples of how our inner state determines the situation outside. It's not the other people who annoy you all the time. It's not that the problem with the paper. The problem is, are you, it's like Marianne Williamson said something. Sometimes it's not our darkness that frightens us. It's our light that frightens us at times. So this is an example of how with good spiritual and psychological work, you can create a different kind of outside situation for yourself. Yes, Sherry, other?
Yes, somebody asked, what about Spinoza?
What about Spinoza? What does it mean, what about Spinoza?
If that person would like to unmute themselves and elaborate, that would be great.
That we see that God is in everything we see.
Yeah.
He's constant presence.
Yeah.
That it's not just, you don't just see him in the synagogue. You see him when you're out in nature. You see him when you deal with other people.
I have no problem with that. Do you? Do you have any problem with that? I think.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I think, look, the Orthodox organized religion of any kind has always had a tension with mystics. Spinoza spoke his experience. Every mother here who gave birth, when you talk to mothers who gave birth, I don't know, not every mother, but a lot of mothers, some mothers, it's quite catastrophic experience. But for most mothers, the experience of giving birth and suddenly having a human being come out of your womb, it's a deeply spiritual experience. For some people, the death of somebody is a deeply spiritual experience. Organized religion often, when it's dead, when it's a power organization, wants to suppress. God has to appear here through these channels. Well, good luck. Go change the world that way. That's not going to help us very much. Having said that, I want to say that it's sad to see that there's a result of the fact that sometimes organized religion is so totalitarian that some people turn their back to the beautiful teachings of the religious scriptures and the great traditions of knowledge. And so again, we don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater. Yes.
You speak of our thank you. You speak of our consciousness creating our reality, but where does the power of our subconscious fit in?
So great. So calling it subconscious or conscious, it's still aspect of our consciousness. So the question is, can we make more and more of our subconscious conscious? Can we, a lot of our subconscious creates our reality. I mean, Jung was probably the most interesting, in my not so humble opinion, speaker about that, writer and teacher about that. Although, of course, Freud talked about it and others. But for Jung, he was talking about something that's the collective subconscious. And that is very interesting. The fact that we always think I'm an individual. I think, the model of John Wayne on the horse with his riding into the sunset, speaking of sunsets, with his gun on his shoulder. That's I am my own person and my own thoughts. Well, not so much. We are actually, a lot of our thoughts, beliefs, investments are we are in some sense puppets of collective subconscious. The more we do our own spiritual and psychological work, which should have been in itself a whole topic for a discussion, what does that mean? The more we do that, the more of the subconscious becomes conscious. And also we start to glean what parts of us are really results of ancestral inheritance, collective inheritance, what parts of us really come from this collective unconscious. And it's also interesting for me that if you look at different forms of art, you see that in different times, people as a collection see reality differently. For example, something happened around the Renaissance. Suddenly, people could see perspective differently. If you look at earlier pictures, then people didn't have that precise way of describing perspective, for example. People were bigger when they are more important. People were smaller when to indicate they are less important. And this is how people were seen. And something happened in the Renaissance that our perception changed. Should I say more accurate? I don't know if it's more accurate. I know that that's the one that's prevailing now. And to me, it's just interesting to look at how in different times and different cultures, people saw the world, perceived it, analyze it, process it in a different way that we do now. I think that's, yeah.
I think we have time probably for one more question, and that's from Lester. How does the interplay of psychology and spirituality work itself out or dance together?
So I'll speak for myself. I actually don't see in my work the difference between the two. If the mystic perspective is correct, and leita tar panui minei, there's no spot where he is not. And first of all, nothing that we do is not spiritual. Spiritual is not a department of our life. Life is spiritual. And then whatever you do to become more conscious, it's in the service of your spiritual and psychological growth. They're not two different things. And of course, there are some approaches that emerge traditionally more from the line of Freud and Adler and Reich and like that. But even when you come to Jung already, where's the psychological and where's the spiritual? These are all compartmental things that is only when our life is really traumatized that we need all those compartments, mind and body, heart and soul, or heart and head, and all that, the inner and outer. But from the mystical point of view, it's one continuum. And I hope that in some way answers your question.
All right. Well, I want to thank Igal Harmelin for speaking with us tonight. I want to thank all of you for being part of this, and also to tell you that at 9:30 in this track, the spirituality track, we'll be hearing from Rabbi Jonathan Slater on Everything Declares Anoki. Meanwhile, thanks for attending the Tikkun, and to paraphrase the thing that we always say in Passover, next year at the JCC. So
let me just
Yes,
say one
go
thing,
ahead.
Sherry, and that is I want to plug in for Jonathan Slater,
Mhm.
who is an amazing meditation teacher, a mystic in his own right, a great mystic, a very deep scholar, and I think those of you who are interested in spirituality, I strongly recommend. So,
Thank you so much.